They laughed, they rolled their eyes, they even called you too deep. But now, they're whispering about how right you were. Chosen one. Do you remember the times when your wisdom was treated like nonsense, when your spiritual insight got dismissed as fantasy? When they ignored your warnings only to find themselves begging for guidance now? There was once a woman who kept dreaming about a storm. Every night she'd see her village flooded. People mocked her, saying she was just dramatic. They called her over-spiritual and told her to stop scaring people. But she couldn't ignore what she felt in her spirit. So she quietly prepared, moved her family to higher ground, stored food, and stayed in prayer. 1 month later, a flash flood swept through the town. Houses destroyed, lives shaken. Suddenly, she was the one they ran to. "You were right," they cried. "Why didn't we listen?" And isn't that your story too, chosen one? You gave warnings, you spoke truth, you told them what you knew in your spirit, but your light was too bright for their blinded eyes. They couldn't see your wisdom because it didn't come with a title, a stage, or approval from the crowd. But now the veil has lifted. The truth has hit them like a ton of divine bricks, and they can't unsee it. You were right, and they misjudged the one who was sent to protect them. As Proverbs 16:21 says, "The wise in heart are called discerning, and gracious words promote instruction." So, what changed? Why are these same people now admiring your wisdom in secret? Why is someone in deep regret for not believing you when they had the chance? And more importantly, what does this shift mean for you now as a chosen one in your divine journey? Chosen ones, stay with me till the very end of this video, because today we're diving into 7 spiritually powerful truths that reveal why people are finally waking up to your divine wisdom and how regret is quietly haunting those who once mocked your insight. This isn't just tea, it's soul truth, it's spiritual confirmation, and it's your validation. Let's get into it, angels. Point 1, you spoke from spirit, not ego. Chosen ones, let's take a moment to talk about your divine insight, the kind that doesn't come from a classroom, a trending reel, or a viral tweet. Your wisdom flows from a deeper source. It doesn't need validation because it's rooted in divine downloads, not worldly applause. You don't study trends, you transcend them. Your soul carries ancient codes. When you speak, it's not about sounding smart or spiritual, it's transmission, it's prophecy. It's spirit speaking through you, calm, quiet, and powerful, but oh, how ego gets in the way. You've noticed it, haven't you? You'd share something deep, something that dropped into your spirit like thunder rolling in a clear sky. You weren't boasting. You weren't even trying to be impressive. You were just being obedient to the pull of intuition. And yet, they rolled their eyes, scoffed, laughed, mocked. Some even labeled you extra, too deep, or strange. But here's what they didn't realize. What you were saying wasn't poetry, it was prophecy. What they thought was mysterious rambling was actually a coded warning. You weren't trying to be right, you were trying to reach them before reality hit. But ego has a volume problem. It speaks in shouts and listens in whispers. And when people are living from ego, they can't hear spirit. Their minds are too full of noise, pride, and projection to catch the soft frequency of discernment. You were tuned into a divine channel, but they were too busy scrolling, competing, or gossiping to hear you. Fast forward to now, they're remembering, replaying, sitting with those conversations. That moment you looked them in the eye and said, "This isn't going to end the way you think." That time you warned, "Be careful who you trust." Or simply, "This isn't aligned." And suddenly it's clicking. Wait, didn't they say this would happen? Yes, you did. Because spirit was whispering through you, and they dismissed you because the package looked too familiar, too human, too ordinary. They wanted a thunderbolt from the sky, not truth from the friend they underestimated. But spirit doesn't always speak in spectacle. It speaks in sincerity, in stillness, in subtle nudges from chosen vessels like you. Now they see it. They see that your weird vibe wasn't odd. It was spiritual discernment, fully activated. Your silence wasn't aloofness. It was protection. Your solitude wasn't loneliness. It was sacred retreat. You weren't doing too much. You were seeing too much. And now that the storm has hit, they remember the one voice that tried to warn them before the clouds rolled in. Don't gloat. Don't go back and say, "I told you so." That's not your path. Instead, rise higher. Let God finish what God started. Because here's a spiritual fact. God doesn't just use enemies to test the chosen. He uses the chosen to teach the enemies. Their regret is the lesson. Your elevation is the proof. You don't need revenge. Your growth is the clapback. Your peace is the flex. Your glow up is the sermon. Let them sit with the silence, with the memory of what you said, with the weight of what they ignored. Let them witness your wisdom in motion. Because when divine truth is dismissed, life becomes the teacher. And when the dust settles, they'll come to realize it wasn't arrogance, it was anointed awareness. So keep shining, keep speaking, keep discerning. You're a divine vessel, and though the world may not understand your frequency at first, they will feel its power in time. Because the world often ignores divine truth until it becomes undeniable reality. Point 2. Your silence screamed wisdom. While the world around you boiled with noise, arguments, and attention-seeking, you chose something different. You chose silence. While others were raising their voices just to be seen, just to feel heard, you stood still, watching, absorbing, learning. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew the right moment hadn't arrived. And when it finally did, your silence spoke louder than their noise ever could. Chosen ones, your silence wasn't passivity, it was power. In a world obsessed with performance and the need to prove one's worth in every room, you chose restraint. That in itself is a sign of deep maturity. Psychology backs this up. Those who practice emotional regulation, who can hold their tongue when others can't, are often the most emotionally intelligent in the room. According to Dr. Travis Bradbury, co-author of Emotional Intelligence 2.0, people with high emotional intelligence know when to express themselves and when to wait. That's exactly what you did. You didn't rush to correct lies or participate in petty gossip. You didn't insert yourself into every drama or try to outshine the loudest voices. Instead, you observed. And in doing so, you understood something most people miss. Wisdom doesn't need an audience. It's not performative, it's transformative. You watched as lies unraveled on their own. You watched egos trip over their own arrogance. You saw the room implode because truth doesn't need to fight. It waits for its moment, then walks in like a king. People remember that. They may not say it out loud, but it echoes in their minds, the image of you sitting quietly in the corner, dignified, undisturbed. While others were scrambling to be relevant, you were becoming timeless. And now that memory haunts them. Why? Because silence has a way of unsettling those who have something to hide. You didn't need to accuse them. They convicted themselves. You didn't need to expose their lies. Truth eventually walked them into the mirror. Your silence was not invisibility, it was strategy. It's like the calm before a storm, the kind of storm that doesn't destroy but rebuilds. You became a presence people couldn't ignore, and now those who doubted you, mocked your quiet strength, or dismissed you as passive, they realized you weren't behind them, you were above them, operating at a level they couldn't comprehend. This is why ancient proverbs say, even a fool is considered wise when he keeps silent. There's a divine power in knowing when not to speak. When you do speak, your words carry weight because they aren't reactionary, they're revelations. In stillness, you let the truth mature. And when it finally arrived, it hit harder than any scream ever could. So no, you didn't blend in with the chaos. You transcended it. And now, as life exposes the lies and rewards the patient, you rise. Not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with divine confidence. Because the truly wise don't rush to speak. They wait to be heard. They know that character always outlives chatter. Your stillness wasn't just about self-control. It was a message to the universe. I don't need to fight for what's mine. What's mine will find me. And it did. And it is. Let them sit with their regrets, their guilt, their haunted memories of your calm, poised presence. Meanwhile, you keep rising in truth, building in silence, and speaking only when your words carry purpose. The world may have been too loud to notice at first, but now everyone sees it clear. Only the wise know when not to speak. Point 3, you saw through what they couldn't. You could see the truth about people, situations, and energy long before anyone else could. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't overthinking. It wasn't because you were too sensitive. It was discernment. You were tapped in, spiritually alert, intuitively awake. And while the world called it negativity, fear, or even drama, the truth is, What you felt was divine clarity. You remember it, don't you? You tried to warn them, that friend they adored. You sensed their jealousy before it turned into sabotage. That relationship they swore was the one. You felt the heaviness in the air before the heartbreak ever arrived. That exciting business venture everyone was raving about, you saw the cracks before the collapse. But when you spoke up, when you raised a quiet red flag, you were brushed off, dismissed. You're just being negative. You're too much. Stop overanalyzing. But here's the thing, Angel, you weren't judging them. You weren't tearing anyone down. You were offering protection. You were seeing the unseen. And now that the masks have slid off faces and true colors have leaked into full view, people are speechless, shocked, in awe. They're looking at you differently, quietly asking themselves, how did you know? Because you were spiritually tuned in. While others were distracted by appearances, titles, flattery, and surface charm, your spirit went deeper. Your discernment scanned energy, not just words. It read intention, not just action. That's why what didn't make sense to them was crystal clear to you. You weren't judging, you were reading the room on a spiritual frequency most couldn't even hear. And this isn't something you learned. This is something you were given. Discernment is not a skill, it's a divine gift. It's your soul's internal compass pointing you toward truth, even when it's hidden behind a smile. And like any spiritual gift, it makes people uncomfortable, because truth always does. Studies in psychology show that intuitive people often pick up on micro-expressions, voice shifts, and body language that others miss. But what science is only beginning to confirm, your soul has always known, energy never lies. And when you're spiritually aligned, even silence speaks volumes. Now here's the beautiful twist. The very people who mocked you are circling back, quietly rethinking everything you ever said. They remember your warnings. Your words are echoing in their minds, not with bitterness, but with realization. And deep down they feel foolish, not because you embarrassed them, but because they ignored a gift meant for their protection. But don't get bitter, Angel. Get better. This isn't the time to gloat or say, I told you so. This is the time to rise. Because when God gives you the ability to see beyond the veil, He also gives you the responsibility to walk in love, not ego. Let them sit with their regret. That's part of their growth. Your assignment is to keep soaring. Discernment is not judgment. It's clarity from above. It's a spiritual superpower that protects, guides, and reveals. And if people are only now realizing your depth, your insight, your vision, it's not because you changed. It's because the truth finally caught up. So keep trusting what you feel. Keep listening to that inner voice. Keep being the light that sees through the dark. In a world full of masks and illusions, your discernment is a divine lens. Use it with humility, use it with grace. And never again apologize for being tuned in, because while others are still figuring out what's real, you already know. Point 4, your rejection was their protection. Let's be real, they laughed at you. Oh yes, they snickered behind your back when you talked about your vision, your faith, your purpose. They rolled their eyes when you said you were waiting for divine timing or letting God lead. They whispered in corners, laughed in groups, and some didn't whisper at all. They were bold in their dismissal. You weren't just excluded from conversations or group chats, you were cut off emotionally, spiritually, energetically. Why? Because you didn't fit into their narrative. You weren't built to blend in, and they didn't know what to do with that. They didn't just ignore your wisdom, they rejected you. Every time you offered a word of insight, a warning they didn't want to hear, or guidance that came from a place of spiritual knowing, they looked at you like you were crazy. But you weren't being loud or arrogant. You were being obedient to your calling, obedient to your discernment, obedient to something higher. And little did they know, by pushing you away, they removed their only lifeline to real truth. See, not everyone has access to divine wisdom. Not everyone can hear what God is saying. Not everyone is spiritually in tune. When you showed up in their lives, it wasn't just coincidence. It was intervention, a God-sent moment wrapped in your voice, your presence, your love, but they dismissed it. Now look at them, scrambling for direction, trying every self-help podcast, reading the latest manifestation trend, repeating affirmations with no real conviction. Meanwhile, you're over here aligned, peaceful, not perfect, but positioned, spiritually glowing, emotionally steady. You're no longer chasing validation because you've tapped into divine confirmation. You've been pruned, processed, and now you're producing fruit. And they're left hungry. It's tempting to feel bitter. After all, these were people you loved, trusted, cared for. You offered loyalty, and in return they offered laughter and suspicion. But don't let it harden you. Get better, not bitter. Your elevation isn't just your reward, it's their lesson. God is using your growth as a mirror, showing them what they mishandled. And guess what? That sting of regret they feel, that's not your burden to carry, that's their classroom. Psalm 118:22 says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. You, chosen one, were that stone. Rejected, mocked, underestimated, and yet look at you now, becoming the foundation others will one day need to lean on." Here's the kicker. Your presence was always protection. Your energy shifted atmospheres. Your prayers covered them even when they didn't know it. Your light kept certain darkness from creeping in. And now your absence. It's their reality check. Let them sit with that silence. Let them feel what it's like without your light guiding them. Regret always follows the rejection of divine wisdom. That's spiritual law. When people choose ego over enlightenment, entertainment over elevation, clout over character, they lose. And it may not be immediate. It might not show up as thunder or lightning, but slowly the cracks start showing. The confusion settles in, the peace disappears, and they remember you were the difference. So keep walking, chosen one. Keep shining, keep aligning. You don't need revenge. Your radiance is the revenge. Your healing is the proof. Your joy is the answer to every question they never had the courage to ask. You were never too much. You were just too real for their comfort zone. In the end, God didn't just separate you to protect you. He separated you to awaken them. Your absence is speaking louder than your presence ever could. And while they sit in the echo of their choices, you'll be over here elevated, anointed, and assigned. Let that truth sink in. You were never the problem. You were always the purpose. Point 5, you've been consistently you. Authenticity is rare but unforgettable. Even when they mocked you, you stayed you. When the world laughed, when they rolled their eyes, dismissed your vision, and told you you were too much or not enough, you didn't bend. You didn't perform. You didn't shapeshift to win their approval. You simply stood tall and kept walking in your truth, even when the path felt lonely. And that's powerful. Even when they doubted you, you stayed you. They didn't see the quiet fire in you, the one that didn't need validation to keep burning. They questioned your path, your dreams, your decisions. Some even hoped you'd trip just to prove themselves right. But instead of shrinking, you rooted yourself deeper. You trusted your intuition over their noise. And now that same intuition they once called weird or woo-woo is the very thing that's guiding you toward your purpose. Even when they copied you later on, you still stayed you. Isn't it funny how the same people who once criticized your ideas are now mimicking them like it's gospel? But imitation, though often flattering, reveals something deeper. They saw something in you that they couldn't quite grasp, so they tried to recreate it. Yet no one can duplicate energy that's divinely aligned. Your wisdom wasn't a trend, it was your truth. That's why it stuck, that's why it inspired, and that's why it can't be replicated. You didn't need applause to keep showing up in integrity. You didn't do it for likes, claps, or great jobs. You did it because it felt right, because it was right. While others were performing, pivoting, and pandering for acceptance, you kept showing up with your full self, no filters needed. That kind of consistency isn't just admirable, it's rare. In a world that rewards gimmicks, staying grounded in purpose is an act of rebellion. Now they look back and realize you've been the same, solid, spirit-led, consistent, and that shakes people. Because deep down, everyone's craving something real, someone real. They may not admit it, but your consistency exposes their chaos. Your authenticity highlights their performance. Your quiet confidence reveals their loud insecurity. You remind them of who they could be if only they had the courage, and that scares them in a good way, not fear like danger, fear like awakening, like the sudden realization that something meaningful has been in front of them all along, and they missed it because they were too distracted by what was popular. You became the mirror they didn't ask for, but desperately needed, not to shame them, but to awaken them. You didn't preach, you simply were. And that's more powerful than 1,000 speeches. Because while they were shape-shifting for approval, you were standing in purpose. You weren't changing to fit the crowd. You were changing the game by simply standing still in your truth. There's a spiritual gravity in that. It draws people in, it plants seeds, and while the results might not be immediate, they are inevitable. Because when you lead with authenticity, your impact is timeless. Authenticity is rare, but unforgettable. In a world where filters dominate and trends shift like the wind, your unwavering essence is what people remember. You're not for everyone, and that's your strength. Those who resonate with you, they remember you, not for being loud, flashy, or trendy, but for being real, for being someone who stayed true to themselves when it was hard, when it was mocked, and when it wasn't cool. So keep being you. Not everyone will get it, but the right ones will. And those who once underestimated your truth may one day thank you for showing them how to find theirs. Because while the world keeps searching for the next big thing, the most powerful presence in the room will always be the one who never stopped being themselves. Point 6. Now they want to tap in too. Oh, now they're talking about energy. Now they're burning sage, charging crystals under a full moon, and using words like frequency, alignment, and manifestation, like they invented them. Suddenly, everyone's posting about vibes and cutting off negative energy. Isn't it funny? The very people who once rolled their eyes at your spiritual walk, who scoffed when you talked about protecting your peace and listening to your intuition, those same people are now trying to download the same inner knowing they used to mock. But guess who planted the seed? You, chosen ones. Let's talk truth. Your quiet transformation, your disciplined walk with Source, your refusal to conform to chaos, it made an impact. Even when they didn't show it, even when they were laughing in public, they were watching in private, taking notes, studying your stillness, mocking your methods, but admiring your results. You see, people often ridicule what they don't understand. It's human nature to fear what's different, especially when it forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've neglected. Your consistency with prayer, your discernment, your strange rituals, they were never strange. They were sacred. But to the unawakened eye, your spiritual strength looked like delusion until life humbled them, until they found themselves in spiritual warfare they weren't prepared for, reaching for answers in places you mastered years ago. Suddenly your words make sense. Your energy feels safe. Your presence feels healing. Now they're reaching out with those humble late-night messages. Hey, I should have listened to you. And while part of you might feel tempted to say, I told you so, that's not your calling. You're not here for revenge. You're here to rise. Because regret is a powerful teacher. But wisdom is eternal. Here's a fact. Studies in behavioral psychology show that when people are introduced to unfamiliar concepts, they often experience cognitive dissonance, a discomfort from trying to reconcile new truths with old beliefs. That discomfort sometimes looks like denial, mockery, or resistance. But over time, when your life reflects peace, purpose, and power, real results, their minds start to open, slowly, secretly, until one day they realize they need what you've had all along. But here's the beauty, angels. Your walk wasn't in vain. Every time you chose solitude over drama, peace over chaos, elevation over ego, you became a living blueprint. And no, you didn't preach it, you lived it. That's why it hit harder. You weren't out to convert people. You were too busy cultivating your own connection to Source. And ironically, that's what drew them in. So what now? Do you gloat? Do you remind them of the times they rolled their eyes? Nope. You keep glowing, keep walking. Let them sit with their regret while you rise even higher. Because your job was never to drag people into the light. It was to be the light. And now that they've recognized it, your legacy becomes a lighthouse, guiding others safely to shore, whether they admit you inspired them or not. Remember this, people may doubt your light until they need it to find their way. And when they do, don't dim it, let it shine. Point 7, God is making your wisdom public. Here's the final truth. Chosen ones, what was whispered in secret is about to be declared from the rooftops. There were moments when you sat in rooms and said things that pierced the silence like arrows of truth. You spoke with clarity, love, discernment, only to be met with side eyes, smirks, and patronizing silence. Some even laughed behind closed doors. You weren't loud, you weren't flashy, you weren't trying to prove a point, but you carried divine wisdom. And because you didn't shout, They assumed you didn't know. Because you didn't demand attention, they thought you lacked substance. They were wrong. God took note. He saw you sow seeds of truth in dry ground. He saw the heartbreak when your discernment was mocked. He saw how you still held your peace, how you stayed humble. And now, because God is never mocked, He's preparing a public display of your elevation, not as a ha-ha moment, but as a revelation. You were always the one, the wise one, the steady one, the clear one. And the world is about to see what heaven always knew. Divine elevation isn't just about success or material gain. It's about alignment. When you rise into your calling, when your gifts begin to flourish, it's a spiritual signpost. Wisdom was always in the room. They just didn't recognize it. It's like that moment when someone finds a priceless painting in their attic. Ignored for years, gathering dust, only to realize it's worth millions. That's you. Underestimated, overlooked, but not anymore. And those same individuals who doubted you, they're not laughing now. Some are tossing and turning at night, wondering how they missed it, how they missed you. Because now your leadership is undeniable. Your voice commands attention. Your breakthrough, it's making waves. They see you moving with clarity, not because you got lucky, but because God's hand is clearly on you. And let's be clear, this isn't about revenge, this is about revelation. God isn't elevating you to gloat over anyone. He's elevating you so that truth is honored, so that the very people who disrespected wisdom will have no choice but to sit and witness what it looks like when obedience meets anointing. So no, don't get bitter. Don't let pride sneak in. Get better. Stay in alignment. Stay humble. Because the same God who allowed you to walk through seasons of ridicule is the same God who will make sure your vindication is visible. As Psalm 23:5 says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And that table, it's not to flaunt, it's to testify. Because when God turns the tables in your favor, it's not to embarrass anyone, it's to awaken everyone. Your story becomes their lesson. Your silence becomes their mirror. Your elevation becomes their revelation. Chosen one, you were never crazy or naive. You were simply tuned into a frequency that others couldn't hear yet. What felt like isolation was actually divine separation, a preparation for elevation. You saw truths before the crowd did. You sensed shifts before they happened. Now, the same world that once dismissed you is waking up to what you've always known. This is not just personal growth. It's spiritual prophecy unfolding. Scripture reminds us in 1 Corinthians 2:14 that spiritual things are foolishness to the natural mind. They couldn't see your vision because it wasn't meant for them yet, but now your wisdom is becoming their guide. The very people who laughed are leaning in, so walk with clarity and purpose. Don't dim your light, shine brighter. You're not here to be understood, you're here to be a signal, and your signal is finally being received.